It is December 1, 2006, at 8:10 p.m. when a call is connected to emergency services. It is a woman. The first thing she says is, "My husband has been stabbed." The operator asks what has happened. The woman responds that an unknown perpetrator has entered the house, attacked her partner. She has hidden. The children are sleeping while the man is lying injured. The operator asks where she is, whether the perpetrator is still there, whether the man is breathing, and whether she dares to approach him. The woman answers that she is afraid the perpetrator is still inside, and that she does not dare to go to him. The man is lying in the bedroom. There is a lot of blood. She says she does not recognize the perpetrator. It was a completely unfamiliar man. She did not see him clearly. She heard noises from the bedroom, went there, and saw the perpetrator attacking the man. The operator instructs her to stay on the line, not to move around the house, to keep the children close, to wait for police and ambulance. The woman confirms. She says that she is afraid, that she does not dare to move. Police and ambulance are on their way. The woman says she hears noises in the house and is unsure if someone is still there. The operator says that help is on the way, and the call ends when the police arrive at the scene. The woman is Anneli Auer, born in 1975, so at the time 31 years old. She lives in a detached house in Ulvila. Ulvila is a small municipality in western Finland, just outside Pori. A quiet residential community, with low buildings, calm streets, and a pace where nothing usually happens. Here, people recognize their neighbors, cars, know who lives where, and notice immediately when something deviates from the ordinary. This is not a place where flashing blue lights are part of everyday life. Anneli lives there with her partner Juhani Auer, who is at the time 43 years old. The couple has 3 children together, aged 5, 3, and 2 years old. The police are the first to arrive at the residence in Ulvila shortly after the emergency call. They enter the house and make their way to the bedroom. There, Juhani Auer is lying in the bed. He has extensive incised wounds to the neck, and there are large amounts of blood in and around the bed. The patrol immediately determines that the man shows no signs of life. The injuries are assessed as incompatible with life. No life-saving measures are initiated. Ambulance personnel arrive shortly afterward. They perform a check at the scene and confirm the death. No treatment is given. Juhani Auer is declared deceased in the home, and 3 small children have lost their father. The forensic examination is concentrated on the bedroom, where Juhani Auer is found deceased in the bed. Other parts of the home show no signs of struggle, disorder, or violence. When police and forensic personnel enter the bedroom, Juhani Auer is lying on his back in the bed. He has extensive incised wounds to the neck. In and around the bed, there are large amounts of blood. The blood is found on the bedding, on the mattress, and in direct proximity to the bed. The blood is concentrated to the bed. There are no documented signs of a struggle in the room. No furniture is overturned. No objects are broken or smashed. There are no traces indicating that the body was dragged or moved after the injuries were inflicted. The position of the body in the bed indicates that the injuries were inflicted where he was lying. The blood pattern is limited to the bedroom. There are no documented blood traces in the hallway, kitchen, living room, or other parts of the home. No bloody footprints are documented throughout the house. There is no technical support indicating that the perpetrator moved around the home after the attack. According to forensic medical assessment, there are no clear defensive injuries on Juhani Auer. There are no documented injuries to the hands or forearms indicating that he attempted to protect himself. There are no signs of a struggle. No weapon is found at the crime scene. No knife and no other sharp object is secured. The murder weapon remains unknown. The forensic investigation secures no unambiguous traces that can be linked to an unknown perpetrator. No fingerprints leading to an external person are identified. No DNA traces from an unknown person lead to an identified perpetrator. There are no technical findings that with certainty show that a foreign person was present in the home. There are no documented signs of forced entry. Doors and windows show no obvious pry marks. No broken panes or forced locks are noted. There is no technical support indicating that someone entered the home using force. Outside the bedroom, the home appears normal and undisturbed. No signs of struggle, disorder, or violence are documented in other rooms. The forensic picture of the crime scene is therefore concentrated on the bed in the bedroom. Juhani lies in his bed, with fatal incised wounds to the neck. Blood is present in and around the bed. There are no signs of a struggle, no defensive injuries, no weapon, no technical traces of an unknown perpetrator, and no secured signs of forced entry. This is the complete forensic crime scene picture. The forensic medical examination determines that Juhani died as a result of sharp force trauma to the neck. The injuries are localized to the neck region and caused extensive bleeding. The cause of death is established as exsanguination following violence to the neck with a sharp object. The injuries consist of deep incised wounds to the soft tissues of the neck. Both superficial and deeper structures of the neck are damaged. The injuries affected blood vessels and the airway. The forensic medical assessment is that the injuries were immediately life-threatening. There are no documented injuries to the hands or forearms that can be interpreted as defensive injuries. There are no signs that Juhani attempted to protect himself or ward off an attack. There are no signs of a struggle. There are no documented stab wounds to other parts of the body. The injuries are concentrated to the neck region. The placement and character of the injuries are assessed as consistent with the violence having been inflicted while Juhani was in bed. There is nothing in the injury pattern indicating that he moved any significant distance after the injuries were inflicted. The forensic medical examination does not determine which specific object was used. The injuries are assessed as having been caused by a sharp object, but it cannot be determined whether it was a knife or another cutting instrument. The murder weapon remains unknown. There are no signs of prolonged struggle or repeated violence to other parts of the body. The injuries are limited to the neck area. The forensic medical assessment is that death occurred quickly as a result of bleeding. There are no signs that Juhani survived for any extended period after the injuries were inflicted. There are no signs is questioned by police shortly after Juhani is confirmed deceased in the home. She states that she was inside the residence when she heard sounds coming from the bedroom. She says that she walked toward the bedroom and then saw an unfamiliar man inside the room. She states that the man was near the bed where Juhani was lying. She recounts that she perceived that the man had attacked Juhani. She says that she became frightened, took the children in and withdrew. She states that she did not dare to approach Juhani and did not dare to intervene because she was afraid that the perpetrator was still in the house. She states that the unfamiliar man then disappeared. She says that she did not follow him and did not see where he went. Anneli Auer describes the man as completely unknown to her. She states that she had never seen him before. She cannot identify him and cannot provide information that would lead to an identification. She states that she did not see any weapon in the man's hand. She does not state that she saw a knife or any other object. She recounts that she then called the emergency number 112. The police initiate a murder investigation. The crime scene is secured and a forensic examination is conducted. The investigation initially proceeds based on the information from the emergency call and Anneli Auer's first interrogation. The police note early on that Anneli Auer states that an unknown man was present in the residence and attacked Juhani in the bedroom. The initial investigative direction, therefore, becomes an attack by an unknown perpetrator. At the same time, the police note that there are no secured signs of forced entry. There are no technical traces of an unknown perpetrator. There are no defensive injuries on the victim, the crime scene. E is limited to the bed in the bedroom. These circumstances are documented and become the subject of continued analysis. The police check doors and windows for signs of forced entry. No clear pry marks are documented. Neighbors are questioned to determine whether anyone saw or heard anything unusual. No observations that lead to the identification of an unfamiliar person emerge at this stage. The investigation also includes examination of the immediate surroundings. No witness statements initially confirm that an unknown person moved in the area at the time. In parallel, additional interrogations are conducted with Anneli Auer to clarify her statements about the unknown man. She maintains that she saw an unfamiliar man in the bedroom and that she did not recognize him. The police document that the murder weapon is missing and that there are no technical traces that immediately lead to an identified perpetrator. At this early stage, there is no suspect. The investigation proceeds broadly and focuses on clarifying how someone could have entered the residence, how the perpetrator could have left the scene, and whether there are witnesses. ID. N. The area THE victim, Juhani, is also investigated. Who could have had a motive to murder him? Whether there had been conflicts or threats leading up to the act. No information supporting this emerges. At this stage, there are no documented reports of conflict in the relationship between Anneli Auer and Juhani. There are no reports of arguments or threats in close temporal proximity to the event. The investigation therefore initially continues with a focus on an unknown perpetrator. During the first days after the death, the police continue to proceed based on Anneli Auer's statement about an unknown perpetrator. Interrogations are conducted with neighbors, relatives, and people close to the couple. The area is checked. No witness statements emerge that support that an unfamiliar person moved in the area at the time. At the same time, the technical picture becomes clearer. The forensic examination shows that the crime scene is concentrated to the bed in the bedroom. There are no signs of a struggle, no defensive injuries, no technical traces of an unknown perpetrator, and no secured signs of forced entry. The murder weapon is missing. These circumstances begin to be weighed together in the investigation. The police note that Anneli Auer has stated that she did not dare to approach Juhani, that she did not see any weapon, and that she did not follow the perpetrator. At the same time, she stated in the emergency call that her partner had been stabbed. This leads to more in-depth questions during interrogations about how she could draw that conclusion. During continued questioning, she is asked to describe in more detail what she saw in the bedroom, the distance at which she was standing, and how she perceived the situation. She maintains that she saw an unfamiliar man, and that she perceived that he attacked Juhani. At the same time, the police review the relationship between Anneli Auer and Juhani. They check whether there are any reports of conflicts, threats, or problems in the relationship. At this stage, there are no documented reports of ongoing arguments, threats, or violence in the relationship. Despite this, the police begin to note that no one can confirm that an unknown person was seen in the area. No technical traces support an external perpetrator. There are no signs of forced entry. Crime scene is limited and shows no signs of struggle. These circumstances are documented and discussed internally in the investigation. The investigation is therefore expanded to also include close relations. This is a routine step in murder investigations when technical evidence is lacking and no external traces exist. Anneli Auer becomes the subject of continued and more extensive questioning. It is at this stage that the police begin to question whether the information about an unknown perpetrator can be correct. This does not occur through a formal decision, but through the investigation gradually beginning to test alternative explanations. At this stage, there is still no charge, no formal suspicion, and no deprivation of liberty. But the focus of the investigation shifts. After the initial days, during which the investigation focused on a possible unknown perpetrator, the police continue to interrogate Anneli Auer in greater depth. At the same time, it becomes clear that the technical investigation does not support an external perpetrator. There is a lack of traces, witness statements, and signs of forced entry. In connection with the in-depth interrogations, Anneli Auer is informed that she is suspected of a crime. She is notified of suspicion of murder. Her role changes from witness to suspect. After this, interrogations are conducted with her as a suspect. She is informed of her rights. The interrogations are documented. Anneli Auer denies the crime. She maintains the account of an unknown perpetrator. She continues to state that she saw an unfamiliar man in the bedroom and that she became frightened, took the children, and withdrew. She does not state that she herself was at the bed during the attack. She does not state that she had any weapon. She does not state that she touched Juhani after the attack. The police ask questions about her movements in the house, about the relationship with Juhani, about everyday life, and about possible conflicts. She denies that there were any conflicts of such a nature that they could explain the violence. At this stage, there is no technical evidence linking her to the act. There are no confessions. There are no witness statements that directly point to her. The notification of suspicion is based on the absence of traces of an unknown perpetrator. Anneli was present in the residence at the time of the murder, and she is the only adult who is known with certainty to have been there. Her statements have not been corroborated either by witnesses or by technical evidence. After Anneli Auer has been notified of suspicion of murder, the police continue with in-depth interrogations and supplementary investigative measures. The technical picture does not change. No new traces of an unknown perpetrator emerge. No witnesses come forward. No new findings are secured at the crime scene. Against this background, the prosecutor decides that Anneli Auer is to be detained. She is deprived of liberty and taken in for further questioning under suspicion of murder. The detention is justified by the grounds on which the suspicion is based. She had opportunity. And there are no other traces. After the detention, further interrogations are conducted. Anneli Auer denies the crime. She maintains that an unknown man was present in the residence and attacked Juhani. She continues to state that she became frightened, took the children, and withdrew. She provides no information that can lead to the identification of any perpetrator. She cannot give a clear description of the perpetrator beyond that it was a man and that he wore dark clothing. She consistently denies involvement. The prosecutor then requests that Anneli Auer be remanded in custody on probable cause suspected of murder. A detention hearing is held in district court. The court decides that she is to be remanded in custody. The remand decision is based on the seriousness of the suspicion, the risk of destruction of evidence, and the risk of interference with the investigation. Anneli Auer is taken into custody. She is now deprived of liberty, pending further investigation. After Anneli Auer is remanded in custody, and the investigation is concentrated on her as a suspect, the prosecution begins to formulate a theory of the crime. It is based on the technical picture, forensic medical assessment, and the absence of traces of an external perpetrator. The prosecutor argues that the attack took place in the bedroom, at the bed, while Juhani was lying in the bed. The injuries to the neck are assessed as having been inflicted while he was in a lying position. The absence of defensive injuries and signs of a struggle is used to support the view that the attack occurred suddenly and quickly. The prosecution emphasizes that there are no technical traces of an unknown perpetrator, there are no signs of forced entry, the crime scene is limited to the bed, the murder weapon is missing, and Anneli had the opportunity to commit the act. Based on this, the prosecutor argues that there is no support for the claim that an external person entered the residence and carried out the act. The prosecutor questions the account of an unknown perpetrator and argues that it is not supported by technical evidence or witness statements. The prosecution maintains that the story of an unfamiliar man cannot be verified. The theory of the crime is based on the assumption that Anneli Auer was present in the residence when the attack occurred, and that she had the opportunity to inflict the injuries. The prosecutor argues that there is no alternative perpetrator who can be linked to the crime scene. The prosecution presents that no other person can be proven to have been in the house, that no one saw an unknown person in the area, and that no technical evidence supports an external perpetrator. The motive picture is initially left open. At this stage, the prosecutor does not point to any concrete motive, but instead focuses on opportunity and the technical picture. The defense disputes the prosecution's theory of the crime and maintains that Anneli Auer did not commit the act. They emphasize that there is no direct evidence linking her to the crime. The defense points out that There is no technical evidence showing that Anneli Auer carried out the violence. There are no blood traces on her linking her to the attack. There are no witnesses or other traces connecting her to the crime. The murder weapon has not been found, and the injuries have not been linked to any object found in the household. They emphasize that the prosecution's theory is based on the absence of alternatives, not on positive evidence. The defense stresses that Anneli Auer stated from the very beginning that an unknown man was present in the residence. They point out that this information was given directly in the emergency call and repeated in interrogations. The defense argues that this supports the view that the account is not a later construction. They point out that it is not unusual for a weapon not to be found in violent crimes, and that the absence of traces does not in itself prove that the perpetrator was a close relative. The defense questions the interpretation that the absence of defensive injuries should be taken as evidence that the victim was not attacked by an external person. They emphasize that attacks can occur suddenly and unexpectedly, even by unknown individuals. They also point out that Anneli Auer stated that she was afraid and that she withdrew with the children. The defense argues that this behavior is consistent with having witnessed a violent crime and becoming frightened. The defense emphasizes that the police have not been able to show how an alleged act would have occurred, where a weapon would have come from, or how Anneli Auer would have avoided getting blood on herself. They also question the handling of traces in the investigation and argue that the absence of external traces cannot be used as proof of guilt. The defense maintains that the investigation has not been able to rule out an external perpetrator, and that the prosecution's theory therefore does not meet the requirement of proof beyond reasonable doubt. When charges are brought against Anneli Auer, the trial begins in district court. The prosecution presents its theory of the crime: that Juhani was killed in the bedroom of the residence, that no external perpetrator can be substantiated, and that Anneli Auer had the opportunity to carry out the act. The prosecutor goes through the technical evidence, forensic medical statements, and the absence of traces of an unknown perpetrator. They point out that there are no signs of forced entry, that the crime scene is limited to the bed, and that there are no witness statements supporting Anneli Auer's account of an unfamiliar man. Anneli Auer is heard in court. She denies the crime. She maintains that she saw an unknown man in the bedroom, that she became frightened, took the children, and withdrew. She states that she did not intervene because she was afraid that the perpetrator was still present. She admits no violence, no handling of a weapon, and no motive. She stands by her account. The defense responds to the prosecution's line by pointing to the lack of direct evidence. They highlight that there are no technical findings linking Anneli Auer to the act, that no weapon has been found, and that no witnesses saw her commit the crime. They emphasize that the prosecution's theory is based on the absence of alternatives rather than positive evidence. The court is presented with technical statements, forensic medical reports, and interrogation records. Witnesses are heard. No new decisive technical findings are presented during the trial. The question of an unknown perpetrator is examined. The prosecution argues that there is no support for such a person. The defense argues that the possibility cannot be ruled out. The court must decide whether the prosecutor has proven beyond reasonable doubt that Anneli Auer committed the act. The district court finds Anneli Auer guilty of murder. She is sentenced to life imprisonment. The court bases its judgment on the following: that she was the only adult in the residence, that no external perpetrator could be substantiated, that the crime scene shows no signs of forced entry, and that her account of an unknown perpetrator was not considered credible. Anneli Auer, together with her defense counsel, appeals the judgment. When the case is taken up by the Court of Appeal, Anneli Auer has been deprived of her liberty for more than 3 years. She was arrested and remanded in custody shortly after the murder in December 2006. Since then, she has remained deprived of her liberty throughout the entire pretrial investigation, the indictment period, the trial in the district court, and now sentenced to life imprisonment for murder, while awaiting the Court of Appeal's review. When she is brought into the appellate hearing, she is therefore not only a suspect, she is a convicted murderer, according to the district court. It is against this background that the Court of Appeal re-examines the case. The Court of Appeal reviews all the evidence from the beginning: the technical investigation, the forensic medical findings, the interrogations, and the arguments of the parties. Unlike the district court, the Court of Appeal conducts an independent evaluation of the evidence. The Court of Appeal finds that there is no direct evidence linking Anneli Auer to the act. There are no technical findings showing that she used a weapon. There are no witnesses who saw her commit the crime. The murder weapon has never been found. The court assesses that the prosecution's theory of the crime is based on assumptions and the absence of alternatives, but not on evidence that meets the standard of proof beyond reasonable doubt. The Court of Appeal finds that guilt has not been proven. The district court's judgment is overturned. Anneli Auer is acquitted. After more than 3 years in deprivation of liberty, she leaves prison as a free person. At this point, one might think that the final word has been spoken. But this is only the beginning of a legal circus without precedent in Finnish legal history. After the Court of Appeal's acquittal in 2010, Anneli Auer is free. The judgment has been overturned. The charges have been dismissed. She is formally innocent. The case is considered closed. But the investigation is not discontinued. The murder of Juhani remains unsolved. The police continue to work on the case. New reviews are carried out. Old information is analyzed again. Interrogations are conducted. Previously collected material is re-examined. The investigation remains open. Years pass. Then, several years after the acquittal, something happens that in practice has no precedent in Finnish legal history. Anneli Auer is arrested again. She is detained once more, suspected of the murder of Juhani, the same act she has already been acquitted of. The decision is based on the prosecution's claim that new evidence has emerged. According to the prosecutor, this concerns information that was not fully examined previously. She is brought in for questioning. She denies the crime. She maintains her previous account. She admits nothing. The prosecutor requests that she be remanded in custody again. The court examines the detention issue again. She is remanded in custody again. This happens despite the fact that she was previously acquitted by the Court of Appeal. It is now that the case enters a new phase. Legally, procedurally, and in the media, to arrest a person again for the same crime after an acquittal is extremely rare. In practice, it requires that the prosecutor claims that new evidence has emerged, that the new evidence is considered sufficiently substantial to justify a new examination, that the court accepts that the case is taken up again. This is a high legal threshold. In Auer's case, the prosecution considers that this threshold has been met. When she is arrested again, she has already been deprived of her liberty for more than 3 years, previously been sentenced to life imprisonment and then acquitted, lived several years as a free person. Now she is once again suspected of the same murder, and the legal process begins again. When the prosecutor, several years after the Court of Appeal's acquittal, decides to reopen the case against Anneli Auer, this is done with reference to new evidence having emerged. It is this evidence that, according to the prosecution, was not fully examined previously and now justifies reopening the case. The new evidence consists primarily of new statements from forensic medical experts, new analyses of the injury pattern, new assessments of the sequence of events in the bedroom. This does not involve new witnesses, confessions, new technical findings at the crime scene or DNA, matches to an unknown person. Instead, it involves new expert assessments of already known facts. The prosecution committee owns new forensic medical experts to review the placement of the injuries, the direction of the wounds, their depth, and the overall character of the injury pattern. Based on this, the prosecutor argues that the injuries are not consistent with a rapid, uncontrolled attack, but instead indicate a more controlled approach. The prosecution argues that this strengthens the theory that the perpetrator had proximity and the opportunity to act without resistance. The new evidence also includes analyses of how long the attack likely lasted, how quickly death may have occurred, and whether the victim had the ability to react. The prosecution argues that this speaks against a surprise attack by an unknown perpetrator, and instead strengthens the theory that the perpetrator had control over the situation. The prosecution also refers to analyses of Anneli Auer's behavior, what she stated in interrogations, how she described the event, and what she did afterward. This is used to question the account of an unknown perpetrator. However, this is interpretative material, not technical evidence. All technical evidence is the same as in the previous proceedings. There are no new findings or traces. What is new lies in how the material is interpreted, not in the discovery of new physical evidence. The prosecution argues that the new expert opinions change the overall picture, that the injury pattern can be interpreted in a way that strengthens the theory of the crime, and that the previous acquittal is no longer sustainable in light of these assessments. This is used as the basis to again notify Anneli Auer of suspicion, detain her, request her remand in custody, and bring charges once more. The prosecutor also raises Anneli Auer's behavior before and after the incident, her statements in interrogations, her movements in the house, and her way of describing the events. This is used to challenge the account of an unknown perpetrator. The defense contests the charges. They emphasize that no new technical evidence from the crime scene has emerged. No new weapon has been found. No new blood traces have been secured. No new witnesses have come forward. There is no confession. The defense points out that the prosecution's new evidence consists of interpretations of already known facts, not new facts. They question the reliability of the new expert opinions and argue that forensic medicine cannot provide definitive answers as to who held the weapon. The defense emphasizes that Anneli Auer was acquitted by the Court of Appeal after a full evaluation of the evidence, and that the prosecution is now attempting to reach a different conclusion based on the same underlying material. Anneli Auer is heard in court. She denies the crime. She maintains her previous account. She admits no violence, no possession of a weapon, and no motive. The court hears expert witnesses, specialists, and the parties. The new forensic medical opinions are discussed in detail. The defense asks questions about methodology, interpretation, and uncertainties. The court must decide whether the new evidence is sufficiently strong to depart from the Court of Appeal's earlier acquittal. The court finds that the prosecution has not met the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt. The court notes that the new evidence consists of expert assessments, not new factual findings. There is no direct evidence linking Anneli Auer to the act. There are no technical traces, no weapon, no witnesses, and no confession. The injury pattern cannot with certainty be linked to her. The charges are dismissed. Anneli Auer is acquitted again in the second trial in the district court. After Anneli Auer is acquitted of the murder in the second trial, the murder investigation is closed. She is, legally, innocent of the murder. The acquittal stands. The murder of Juhani remains unsolved. But the legal process is not over. Instead, the prosecution brings charges against Anneli Auer for providing false information and for defamation. The charges concern her statements about an unknown perpetrator. The prosecutor argues that Anneli Auer, through her statements to the emergency number 112 and in police interrogations, provided incorrect information by claiming that an unknown man committed the circa crime. According to the prosecution, these statements misled the police and obstructed the investigation. The prosecutor also argues that her statements pointed to a person close to her as a possible perpetrator, which led to suspicion against that person and therefore constituted defamation. In this process, the murder itself is not examined again. It is not about who killed Juhani. It is about whether Anneli Auer provided false information, whether those statements were capable of misleading authorities, and whether she, through her statements, defamed a named individual. The prosecution maintains that there is no support for the presence of an unknown perpetrator at the scene, and that Anneli Auer therefore must have knowingly provided false information. The defense contests the charges. They emphasize that Anneli Auer has consistently maintained the same account, that she has not changed her version, and that she has never admitted that her statements were false. They argue that it cannot be proven that she knowingly provided false information. The defense points out that she was acquitted of murder, and that the possibility of an external perpetrator has not been legally excluded. They argue that one cannot convict someone of providing false information when it has not been proven that the information was untrue. The court finds that Anneli Auer provided incorrect information to authorities, and that these statements were capable of misleading the investigation. She is convicted of providing false information. She is also convicted of defamation of a person who was pointed out in her statements. The sentence is a suspended sentence and a fine. This means Anneli Auer is acquitted of murder but convicted of providing false information and defamation. She is not convicted of killing Juhani, but of her actions in connection with the investigation. This is a legally complex situation, but legally clear. She is not convicted of murder, but convicted of providing false information. The murder of Juhani remains unsolved. The police have no leads, and the case is cold. 3 small children lost their father and had their lives shattered. Juhani was 43 years old when he was brutally murdered in his own bed. At the same time, new investigations are initiated against Anneli, this time concerning sexual abuse of her children. In 2013, Anneli is charged with aggravated sexual offenses against her 3 children. The case is tried in the district court in 2014. Anneli Auer is sentenced to 6 years in prison. She appeals to the Court of Appeal. In 2016, the Court of Appeal examines the case. Deficiencies are identified in the child interviews. Anneli's eldest child has consistently denied that the allegations are true. Anneli Auer is fully acquitted. At that point, she has spent 18 months wrongfully convicted for sexual abuse against her own children. The children later tell Finnish media how they were pressured during interrogations, both in connection with the murder investigation and the sexual abuse allegations. Children who, in different ways, lost both of their parents. The murder of Juhani remains unsolved. The police have no trace of the killer. The case is cold.